Are you looking for ways to recognize your volunteers? Oftentimes we think of plaques and ribbons, but today we're going to talk about recognition beyond those tangible items to a complete guide for volunteer recognition. Hi, I'm Janet Fox at the University of Tennessee Family and Consumer Science. I'm the Assistant Dean there, and I have joining me today Megan Franks.
I am the Volunteer Leadership Specialist with Louisiana 4-H at Louisiana State University.
And we're excited to present to you today Beyond Plaques and Ribbons with our over 50 years of volunteer recognition experience. Today's session overview includes why recognition is important. We're going to talk about the principles of volunteer recognition. We're going to talk about the differences between tangible and intangible recognition, formal and informal recognition. And today we're going to uncover the motivational needs of your volunteers and match that to recognition. And finally, we're going to provide some strategies and resources that you can use to incorporate in your volunteer recognition program. So let's start. Why is recognition important? Well, of course, we all like to feel appreciated, and volunteers are not any different. So we need to show them that we appreciate what they do for us and that they're a valuable part of our team. Research has also shown that recognition programs does increase volunteer commitment, and it helps bolster positive volunteer performances. We'll talk about some of the common ways to recognize volunteers, and some of those tangible ways are through letters and banquets and professional development opportunities. But please know that volunteer recognition should be part of your volunteer system and a critical part to volunteer retention. So let's start with the Mentimeter activity. We all have great ideas, and why don't you share some of yours? Share your recognition ideas in the Minty Poll below. You can scan or screenshot the Minty, and it'll take you straight to the Minty, and then enter the code 1326769.7 and just contribute to the conversation by sharing what you've done recently to recognize your volunteers. We'll give you a couple minutes to do that.
So why don't we go over to the Minty Pole and see what people have contributed. So we've got some thank you notes, foods and snacks, home cooked meals. I always like a home cooked meal to be recognized for my service. Gas cards, creating leadership roles for your volunteers. And this is a great idea. So creating a volunteer impact report, professional development in the form of conference registration. So lots of great ideas being shared so far. So you can continue to contribute to that conversation by using menti.com and the code on your screen, 1326-7697.
So thank you for participating in that volunteer poll. One thing that we want to emphasize is just some of the principles of good volunteer recognition. It's really important that you emphasize success rather than failure. And while that seems like kind of a no-brainer. I'll tell you a personal story that happened to me. Long story short, I signed up for my son's PTA book fair committee. And there were 5 of us on the committee. The person that was leading the committee had done the book fair forever and ever and ever. Well, as we progressed and we didn't even get started, the people started dropping and quitting and moving to different schools and moving out of state. And so at the very end, I was the only one left to do the book fair. Well, I was ill prepared, but I tried my best and put a lot of time and effort into it, and talked to anyone I could talk to. And so I, from my perspective, thought the book fair was quite a success, particularly given what I had been through. Well, no one had mentioned the goal for the book fair was raising $1,500. Well, we raised like $1,200. And in the PTA meeting, as they were recognizing us for doing the book fair, it was emphasized that we did not meet our role or our goal. And so it really, needless to say, I've really coached the next person that took over for book fair, but I was not really that involved the next year because I just had worked so hard, and really I felt like a failure. It was recognized in a public way as a failure. So be sure to really emphasize that success. And then another important thing is deliver recognition in a very personal way. Oftentimes, as we get to know volunteers, they might have hobbies or things that they know and love. And so to recognize them, if they like trees, to plant a tree in their honor, or if they like food, to recognize them with food. So deliver the recognition in a very personal way. And tailor the recognition to be unique for the people involved. So if it's a team of people, make sure you recognize the entire team and make sure you try to really relate the recognition to something that the team has accomplished. So really recognize, educate, to inspire others for future action, and to really highlight and uplift their achievement that you have. The other thing that's so critical is to really think about the timing of the event or the recognition, and make sure that there's a clear connection between the recognition of the individual and the accomplishment. How many times do we do an intangible recognition of way to go and to a very busy person, and they might say, well, I don't know what are they recognizing me for? So be very specific in what you're thanking them for and why it was special. You know, if they met everything with a positive attitude, if they overcame something, if they went the extra mile. So be sure to go the extra mile when you're providing recognition for your special volunteers. So we're going to talk a little bit about tangible and intangible recognition. And the note that I learned, and please in the chat, tell us what type of form do you often prefer with your volunteers. So as we talk about tangible recognition, those are those things that we can touch and hold. So those thank you notes, the gift cards that we provide, the food, the certificates, service pins, celebrations. We pay for a registration to professional development opportunity. We have a uniform of sorts, whether that be a name badge or a smog or a shirt of some sort, and then just a supply kit or supplies that they need to provide to serve their recognition experience or their service experience. And then intangible, just helping the person feel very satisfied with the experience and allowing them to actually apply the skills or learn skills that they're developing. Focusing on those people that love relationships to help them really connect with the people that they're serving, showing them that they did make a difference and telling them so, and just the verbal thank you or the pat on the back that you can give. And so Megan found this research. Megan, if you would like to share the research part of this slide that you found as part of Phillips and Phillips's research.
Sure, and I've had several studies. The one that was really recent had almost 900 hospital volunteers. They showed that volunteers that had more opportunities for rewards and then social interaction, so interaction with the individuals being served, the staff, as well as other volunteers in the program, and then had the opportunities to reflect on their experience, were much more satisfied in their volunteer roles. So having that rewards, that social interaction, and that reflection. In addition, I've found another study that showed that some of your more older or more tenured volunteers, being that they've served, several years, they oftentimes prefer those intangible recognition over the tangible recognition. So it might potentially be that they've already received several of those prizes or gifts or certificates. Maybe they've already been elevated to those various levels of service pins. Maybe they have all the supplies or the most premier service uniform. So they're looking more for those opportunities to contribute and provide feedback to the organization, and then showing that the work that they're doing is making a difference. So looking more for that intangible recognition. So I think this begs the question of which form of recognition do volunteers prefer in your organization, and thinking about maybe the younger generation, potentially that tangible recognition, or maybe the less tenured volunteer versus that intangible recognition that may be preferred by the more tenured segments of your volunteers. So something to think about. So we'll move on from here. So on the same lines of tangible recognition is having those volunteer recognition items that have a significance to your program culture. So in looking at some of these studies, there was a tangible low-cost item that is organizational specific. So something that's really like embedded in your culture is often more high rated when it comes to your tangible gifty items. So this could be an example. This could be if you're working in an organization where everybody has a nameplate or a badge that is a symbol of the position that they have. And as your volunteer assumes more leadership responsibilities, they could assume a new badge or a new color or even a new position. So something that's more embedded in your culture, say everybody wears that badge as a symbol of their, professional role that they have. Another example, and the one that I want to share in previous experience, where I used to work, or a program that I used to work for, we had something called a maroon cord. And so at this university, graduation cords are really popular. Everybody wanted to have a graduation cord because it was a symbol of an organization that they were a part of. And for this particular cord, it was a symbol of your sacrifice or for you making your community better. The cord itself only costed 75 cents, but in saying that, those volunteers had to serve over 4 years and over 50 hours of service in those calendar years to receive that cord. And they were extremely popular, and it was a symbol, and it was a very popular symbol, but on our end, it was a very low cost way for us to recognize our volunteers in a very popular way. So just thinking about those low cost items that are embedded into your culture that some of your volunteers might really look for, that could provide you with just, more budget opportunities for other things. So along that same line, a study from Volunteer Canada, a recognition study, noticed that 80% of organizations claim just not having a budget to recognize volunteers, which is interesting because 80% of volunteers want to be recognized by hearing the impact of their contribution. So instead of just being given tangible items that cost money, you could potentially generate a volunteer impact report, recognizing volunteer efforts, something that you could put out in a low-cost way on social media or even in newsletters, just allowing volunteers to see the impact of their contributions versus always or having that tangible item that signifies the service they provide. So just some ways that you can stretch your budget a little bit by still allowing volunteers to be recognized for their efforts. So next we'll talk about the formal versus informal recognition. And so when we talk about formal recognition, more popular methods, so your large banquets, those special events, maybe you have a volunteer bulletin board where you have a volunteer of the week or a month. Maybe you like to submit articles in the paper to recognize some of your standout volunteers. I know in Louisiana 4-H, we have a Hall of Fame, and for National 4-H, we have a National Hall of Fame, or possibly an online directory for your volunteers. That's awards, plaques, and then thinking about that more informal recognition. So that could be sending out personal emails or letters, involving volunteers in decision-making processes, so having them provide feedback, being that a lot of times they're on the front line in those roles. They can see potential ways you can make your program better, making those improvements. Maybe you're recognizing special occasions in that formal recognition, so you know when they're having birthdays, know when they're having anniversaries, and just showing an interest in their life and having that that actual relationship. And this also includes reaching out to volunteers when you see an opportunity to serve that you know that they're best suited for, especially if it's a role that allows them to develop more professionally or allows them to serve in a leadership responsibility. And this is important because studies show that some volunteers prefer that informal recognition over formal recognition. So it's important to think about when you're developing a recognition model, having both a formal and informal strategies to recognize all types of volunteers in your program. So having a healthy mix of both. So, and that begs the question of whether volunteers want to be formally recognized. And so what the research says, so about 60% of us like to have these large banquets to recognize our volunteers, or using, 50% of us have public acknowledgements as ways to recognize our volunteers for their efforts. And about 70% of some, and this is, one particular study, there's other studies as well, but these particular volunteers prefer to be thanked informally rather than a large gathering. So if your main way of recognizing your volunteers every year is a large banquet, potentially there's a segment of your volunteers that don't want to be recognized in that method. So as more and more organizations move to this large banquet model of recognizing volunteers, possibly a large percentage of your volunteer workforce is looking for a more informal way to be recognized for your efforts. So something to think about, again, in developing strategies for recognizing your volunteers and their diverse needs.
So just as Megan explained, different people have different motivations, and so we do need to customize the recognition that we provide. So take a screenshot or go to the address listed above on the PowerPoint slide, and let's see what motivational type you are. This is a theory, according to McClendon and Atkinson. It's a motivational theory, and it really informs us to how to meet those motivational needs that volunteers have. So take a moment, and then we will discuss. And there's 3 types of motivation that we're going to talk about. achievement, affiliation, and power and influence. We'll give you a couple minutes and then we'll go through what each motivation is. So now that you've taken the quiz, you know what you are, achievement, affiliation, or power influence. And so we're going to talk about achievement. What I'd like for you to do in the text, please, in the chat, please put some ways you can recognize achievement-oriented volunteers. And so as we know, achievement-oriented volunteers are really trying to achieve something. They really like unique achievements. They like to be recognized. These individuals like a system where they can accomplish and have goals, a badger system, etc. They like the recognition to be linked to a very specific achievement or accomplishments. They like the words best or most. And then they also like to grow as individuals. So additional training or more challenging tasks would be welcomed by an achievement-oriented volunteer. So what are some ways that you think that you could recognize these achievement volunteers? Well, of course, plaques and awards really resonate with these individuals as they like some tangible way to document that they have achieved. Letters of recognition, oftentimes, especially with corporate volunteers, recognizing them with their bosses in terms of their representation of the company is appreciated. Of course, we mentioned that additional training in the form of professional development. They're constantly improving their skills and ability, and so this is really important. Having a career ladder where volunteers can move up and advancement in the task, and also having and recognizing, some of those most and best awards by having the most dedicated volunteer award. Our next area that we're going to talk about is affiliation. And just as it sounds, are those volunteers that like to be connected and part of a team. And so when you really recognize those affiliated volunteers, they like to be part of a group. They like group events. Oftentimes, they don't want to have to stand out among their peers. They want to be part of that group in the presence of their peers, their family, or other individuals that they're bonded with or their friendship group. They really like the personal touch, and so this is where you really need to customize any kind of recognition to an affiliated volunteer if you're singling them out by really letting them know they know you. So if they have a green thumb, providing them a plant. If they love cooking, giving them some ingredients to make or an apron that they can use. And they also like recognition that's voted on by peers because they are so team oriented and they like to be connected. Ways that you should recognize them, they love creative opportunities to express in thank yous or gifts. So those little fun pun ideas that you can put on their desk and help them have a little surprise for the day is really appreciated. They love social events and they like to be part of social events, so any kind of social that you can do. And oftentimes, if you're having a formal presentation for volunteers to recognize them, have some social time as part of that event. It's really important in your affiliation. Volunteers will appreciate that. And awards programs mean a lot more if they can invite their peers or families to help them understand what they're doing. And then a way to really connect with the clientele. Oftentimes, these individuals are there because they want to connect with the cause of the clientele. And let's talk about power and influence volunteer. So power and influence volunteer is one that really is very strategic in how they are. They often have a goal. Sometimes that goal is a personal goal for advancement. But unlike an achievement-oriented volunteer who wants to really learn more and achieve more, this person wants to gain power and position based on their engagement in the situation. This could be personal power that they want, or they could also want that power because they believe in the cause of their organization. So they have a passion maybe for cancer research, or they have a passion for a particular disease and they want to be an advocate for that. So their real goal is to get power and influence that helps the social movement of whatever cause they're a part of. And so we're recognizing a volunteer that is motivated by power and influence. It's important to use the word promotion. So conveying greater access to authority and information. So for this individual, you're going to want the head of the hospital to recognize this individual if you would like to recognize or make sure that they get featured in where people that are quote higher up can see them. They like that recognition to be in the community at large, in the newspaper, and so their name and face is associated with this very powerful cause. And they also want to know the impact. While everyone wants to know the impact, it's a little bit different, but the numbers influenced by this volunteer, they want to have recognized on broader than just the role, but the organization, what that means for organization, what that means for the patients in your hospital, or the community. And so ways to recognize this volunteer is they really do like an impressive title. And so it's really important. And some of them would use that title to further the cause of your organization. And so that's very important. They also like to be featured. They want to be able to be in front of people and influence people by sending their message. And then really be the media contact, public relations. Oftentimes this person is really good in fundraising because they They want to know the movers and shakers. And so as you think about that volunteer recognition that you would provide, this is a way that you can customize whether somebody's achievement oriented, whether they're affiliation oriented, or whether they're power and influence oriented. Think about these things as you customize that recognition opportunity.
So next we're going to talk about a couple strategies for recognizing volunteers, especially now in the virtual space that some of us are in. So learning how your volunteer prefers to be recognized. So we talked about tangible and intangible recognition, formal and informal recognition, also motivational theory, brought in some of that. So how to find out those unique motivations and preferences. I learned from a program recently that they created a survey that was included in their annual volunteer paperwork. And the survey asked specific questions about the motivations of the volunteers, and then their preferences, and then their needs as well. So what supplies they needed to perform their role. And then throughout the year, they went back to this information, and as they recognized their volunteers and offered them incentives throughout, they were rewarded with things that they needed and they desired, and then were matching those motivations with the recognition that they were providing. So it was very, very effective. So if you find yourself with that annual volunteer paperwork that all of your volunteers complete, putting in that potential survey that asks those specific questions and helps you to meet those unique recognition needs of your volunteers. A very effective strategy that we utilize there. Also, another method, and this is a low budget kind of meaningful reward strategy that some people may know of and others may not. Through the Points of Light organization and now AmeriCorps, the President's Volunteer Service Award, which is the United States President's Volunteer Service Award, is an option for certifying organizations. So this could be nonprofits, could be hospitals, could be any organization that takes and utilizes volunteers to perform their mission. You can complete a very simple onboarding quiz to be a certifying organization, and then you're able to provide your volunteers with a President's Award, which is a pin, a certificate, and then a letter from the current U.S. President. And it's a very nice award, and it's low cost, very, a few dollars. You must capture those hours that your volunteers are providing. So if you have a mechanism that you're using to do that, it's great. If you don't, there's a platform called Give Pulse that you can use that offers that free low-cost method to allow your volunteers to log the service they're providing and then generate more of a service resume for what it is that the impact that they're providing your organization. So on this slide, you'll see there's one of our volunteers that uses the platform. I was able to log 274 hours and various impacts, reflects on all of those experiences that she's providing, and then it allows on my end for me to capture the impact of her and then other volunteers as well. And through her logging this impact, she was able to receive a pin and a certificate from our state service commission. So it's another thing that you can look into as well to honor your volunteers. So with volunteerlouisiana.gov, which is in our state, we were able to offer them a really nice service pin and certificate from our Volunteer Louisiana. And other states may have these state service commissions that offer those either free or low budget ways of recognizing. They have various ways of recognizing volunteers throughout the state, either through awards that you can apply for your volunteers as well. other awards. And so I encourage you, if you have not done that, reach out to your state service commission and see what options you have for minimal budget ways to reward your volunteers. And another potential strategy, so in this world of, virtual learning and sometimes virtual service, there's a growth in digital credentialing. So we've used this tool called Badger, and that's on your screen you'll see it's spelled badgr.com. They offer free options for organizations to create digital badges to reward volunteers for when they reach a certain milestone or participate in professional development opportunities. And so they can capture these digital badges recognizing the different contributions they're making, as well as the different professional development milestones that they reach. You can use the Badgers tool to create these digital badges, but if you may have an individual in your organization that is skilled in graphics as well, that they can make them. But there's a free way to offer these credentials to your volunteer through this program, badgr.com. A great way to allow them to visualize their contributions. All right, so now it's time to do some reflection. So we talked about tangible recognition, informal, formal recognition, principles of recognition. We discussed those motivational theories. So what did you take away from today's session? And what new volunteer recognition ideas might you implement in your organization? We've shared up a Jamboard, so if you use the link on your screen, type that into a browser, it'll take you to that Google Jamboard where you can take a sticky note and follow the instructions on the board to share some of your takeaways from today's session. So we'll give you a few moments to do that. So here you are on the Jamboard. So to share to the conversation, click the sticky note icon and then type in the takeaway from today's session. And then you can share it on the screen. And if you run out of space, you can tab over to start a new Jamboard. All right, well, thank you for joining us today. We hope that you learned some new volunteer recognition strategies for your organization. We do have an accompanying guide, your guide to volunteer recognition, that we hope you'll find those resources helpful. And feel free to reach out to us with any questions or comments in the future.